Ancient Roman roads have stood the test of time. Some are over 2,000 years old and still intact. But how closely do they resemble the highways in Europe of today?
Come on, mate, let me in.
No, I'm meeting my wife at Olive Garden.
Stop hitting me.
Well, you might be surprised. Have you ever heard the saying, all roads lead to Rome? Yeah, I hadn't either before he wrote this. But it's a phrase that's pretty much true all across Europe. Many modern day highways and roads in Europe and some in Africa and the Middle East still follow the same path that ancient Romans once traveled on. Seriously, if you live in Europe, your morning commute could be the same road as some dude 2,000 years ago who sold wooden sandals or tablets or something, but not the touchpad kind, you know what I'm talking about. The Roman Empire was one of the largest of all the ancient empires, and one of their crowning achievements, aside from the first Olive Garden, was their road system. Romans were building roads from around 500 BC to 395 AD. Using advanced paving techniques, they laid over 50,000 miles of road, and a lot of them are still intact 2,000 years later. The streets I take to work were paved last summer, and they already have potholes in them. Great job, California. It doesn't even snow here. Like, that's not an excuse. Well-constructed roads meant that large military convoys and citizens could travel easily. It also facilitated trade and communication between cities, and most importantly, it showed control. Roads were a huge factor in how the Roman Empire was able to expand and thrive as it did. Unpaved roads had existed ever since humans started migrating, but Romans developed methods to pave and preserve roads based on Etruscan road building methods. The types of roads and the methods used to build them depended on the terrain and the materials that were available. There were three main types of roads built by the Romans: Via Terrana, a plain road of leveled earth; Via Glariata, an earth road with a graveled surface; and Via Munita, a regular built road paved with polygonal blocks of lava rock. The most sophisticated and prevalent of all three was the Via Munita. An engineer would assess the site and determine exactly where the road would go. Then the agrimensores would survey the roadbed. They used two tools, a rod and a device called a groma, which helped them measure right angles. Then gromatici would place the rods, and the engineers would command them to move the rods and make adjustments to get the straightest possible line. Other plowmen, called legionnaires, would do finer digging using spades, carving out the ditch or fossa. Mensores were workers who would measure out materials so that the masons could get to work paving. Starting a meter down, the bare earth was pounded until it was level. On top of that, small rocks were laid no bigger than a person's hand. On top of that, concrete made of broken stones, rubble, and lime was laid down. Above the rougher concrete was a layer of finer concrete. Laid on top of that concrete were the surface level stones. These stones were mainly basalt or lava rock, but differed depending on what was available. They were fitted to create a cambered surface, with the center of the road being higher than the sides, effectively draining water away from the middle and funneling it to the side of the road where it didn't impede carts. The final step in Roman road building was often installing raised walkways on either side. These guys were making sidewalks. Roads were standardized to around 4.2 meters wide to allow two vehicles to pass each other. Guys, the Romans were smart. At one point, there were 30 main roads leading out of Rome. Built between 312 and 264 BC, the Appian Way, or what the Romans called Via Appia, was the first major road to be constructed during the Roman Empire. It connects Rome to Brindisi in southeast Italy, and nowadays it's called Strada Statale 7, or State Street 7. The modern-day Appian Way is still a main thoroughfare in southeast Italy, used by hundreds of thousands of commuters every day. Romans prioritized straight roads over everything else, as they are the quickest and most efficient way to get from point A to point B. No obstacle was too big, whether it was a river, valley, mountain, or your mom's butt. They found a way to build a straight road either over it or through it. Romans developed successful methods to build bridges over large spans. Made of wood, stone, or a mix of the two, they were built so solidly that many of them are still around today. One of the biggest to ever exist was Ponte Ratto, a bridge over the Carapel River which spanned 700 meters and had 10 arches. Another famous Roman bridge is the Alcantara Bridge in Extremadura, Spain. It's 45 meters high and 181 meters long. Despite being built in 104 AD, this bridge is still standing and looks pretty good for being 1900 years old. For Roman engineers, a mountain wasn't going to stop them from making a straight road. Not that mountain. Although, if he was trying to stop me, I'd probably quit. Oftentimes, impassable mountains would hinder road building, so Romans would dig tunnels. Using counter-excavation, a fancy word for digging from both sides of the mountain, Romans were able to dig 700, 800, and even 1,000-meter tunnels. Sometimes tunnel projects would last for many years, as digging through solid rock could slow production down to 30 centimeters a day. All of this is in metric. I don't know how long any of this is. 1,000 meters? That could be like this long. I don't know. 30 centimeters? That's how tall I am. I actually don't know. About that much? Maybe? Navigating thousands of miles of Roman roads would have been confusing without maps. But luckily, the ancient Romans were pretty good at drawing them. Most guides that were used were called itinerarium and were pared down maps with a sequential list of cities a traveler would pass on a journey. Road goers could also rely on milestones to gauge distance. Milestones, or milearia as they were called, were large carved stones, sometimes up to 2 tons, that were placed every mile. The modern word mile actually comes from the Latin milia passum, 1,000 paces, and equaled about 4,841 feet. Wait, does that mean their paces were 4.8 feet? How tall were these Romans? The ease of travel on Roman roads meant that commerce and trade were facilitated. This created prosperity wherever the roads passed through. Towns that had access to good roads fared way better than other towns with less access. Plus, Roman roads were safe from bandits, robbers, and hamburglers. Other patrolmen, called beneficiarii, were around to levy taxes on goods being transported on the roads and collect tolls at provincial borders, bridges, and mountain passes. It wasn't always free to travel on Roman roads, but it was a small price to pay for increased safety and prosperity. Modern-day cities are still benefiting from this prosperity. A study done in 2010 discovered a remarkable pattern of persistence, showing that greater Roman road density goes along with greater modern road density and greater economic activity in 2010. Cities like London, Paris, Zurich, Manchester, Frankfurt, Barcelona, Venice were all founded by this ancient Roman Empire and still benefit from their roads 2,000 years later. Seriously, I could keep going for 10 minutes reading off cities, but I haven't had my afternoon milk yet, and I'm drying up. Zach, get my milk ready. I'm almost done. I need my milk. Bring the cookies too, Famous Amos. None of this Chips Ahoy bullshit. Roman roads have lasted to this day because of how incredibly efficient, easy to navigate, and well built they are. While many of the roads have been destroyed or broken up over the years, they still remain the groundwork for modern day roads and highways. Hey, we talk about the weird stuff in the car world every week here on Wheelhouse, so hit that yellow subscribe button right here about. Check out last week's episode of Wheelhouse right here. Check out this episode of Up to Speed. We have a ton of new merchandise in our store. Go to donutmedia.com and cop yourself some cool stuff. I felt old saying that.